Hi and welcome to Upfront. I'm your host, Kristina Kruchkowski. Joining us on this month's episode is City of Nelson Mayor Deb Kozak. We're going to be talking all about exciting infrastructure projects, as well as medical cannabis dispensaries and more.
Originally from Saskatchewan, Deb Kozak and husband Peter have lived in Nelson for over 30 years. Deb is the first woman to serve as mayor of the City of Nelson. She has served 3 terms on City Council and is the president of the Association of Kootenay Boundary Local Governments. She chairs the Columbia River Treaty Local Governments Committee and is passionate about the future of the Columbia Basin, its issues, and the promotion of understanding and cooperation between communities and nations. She is one of the founding members of the Nelson and Area Economic Development Partnership, having worked in both the private and nonprofit sectors, and has served on volunteer organizations at local, provincial, and national levels.
Joining us now in studio is Nelson's Mayor, Deb Kozak. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
So first off, let's talk about something that's fairly visible and has been visible within the community. Some really great upgrades happening, the Hall Street project. So this is part of the sustainable waterfront and downtown master plan the City of Nelson has in place. The first phase of that project is complete, is that right?
That's correct.
And that included improvements to the IODE park, as well as creating a new plaza in the 500 block. But let's talk now about the focus for phase 2. What is that going to include?
Well, Hall Street has been identified as the one clear access point for the public straight through to the waterfront. So in the process of doing infrastructure renewal, what we have to do, infrastructure renewal, water and sewer, that happens maybe once every 80 years. In our planning, what we are identifying are those important corridors for people and how they will last for the next 80 years. And if money is available through grants, through senior levels of government, it makes sense that we would do other improvements as well. Mm-hmm. So Hall Street Phase 2, a very important part of the infrastructure there is going to be mitigating flood events. You might recall, I think Shaw was there and filmed when we had a major flood event a couple of years ago. I think it was 2012 actually. Mm-hmm. And there was a rain event and huge snow melt, and suddenly the streets were flooded. We're going to do improvements there to mitigate that, but as well we're going to do improvements to the rest of the street to make it more finish that gateway to the waterfront. So there will be improvements to the waterfront pathway. There will be another small park at the bottom of Hall Street, and there will also be some steps that people can access to go to the water. And we think that those improvements will really be welcomed by the residents of Nelson and also people who come to visit us.
And this is part of what you call the Stores to Shores, is that right?
That's correct. We know that Baker Street is the heart of our downtown, but we know that our business district is much wider than that. So for people to have the opportunity to move up Hall Street and past some of the stores and shops that are there as well is an added bonus.
Now this has been quite the project because you've changed grades in the road, correct? It's caused some issues for sidewalks and traffic, but that's all being sorted out, isn't it?
It is being sorted out. We did lessen the grade. Hall Street will always have a steep grade. If you want to walk up Hall Street. So we changed the steps so that there was more terracing, so people could actually linger a bit and catch their breath, or turn around and have a look down how far they've come. But as well, it's about making that street pedestrian friendly, safe, and moving into the future in a way that's going to enhance the availability of the waterfront to everyone.
So what is the timeline, do you know, for the phase 2 of the project?
Well, phase 2, we were successful in getting grant funding from the federal government, and there is a timeline on that. If we don't start that project this year, we could be out of luck and miss that train as it passes through. So this phase of the project is going to be a bit more complicated. We need to work with CP Rail, we need to work with Ministry of Highways, and we also need to to work with some private roadways as well. So it's a bit more complicated. We're also working very closely with the business owners on Lakeside Drive, because there must be constant access maintained so that people can get to their stores. So we're working closely. We have a working group that's working closely with them, and we're excited about the project. But I have to say, when I first thought we got funding for phase 2, I went yay, and then I went, oh my gosh, here we go again, because phase 1 was fairly challenging in moving traffic through. But we'll do it, and the end result will be well worth it.
Will phase 2 mark completion of the Hall Street project?
Phase 2 will mark completion of the Hall Street project.
That's exciting.
It is exciting, and the way people have embraced it. There was some uncertainty. People weren't so sure about some of the aspects of the project, but we've had a few events in the plaza that's been created at the top end of the street that have been extremely well attended. There's been music events and huge gatherings of people. We had the Santa Parade this last year culminate in the plaza, and just to have that added extra green space down at the bottom as well, at the bottom of Hall Street near the Prestige Inn, is going to really enhance and make life enjoyable for people.
Okay. Some other upgrades that are on the radar in Nelson come back up to Baker Street. There's been some discussion lately about upgrades to Baker Street as part of the downtown urban design strategy. So now this isn't just about beautification, correct? This is actually a need, as you talked about infrastructure with Hall Street. That's a similar issue being faced with Baker, isn't that? Is that correct?
That's correct. We have the opportunity to do infrastructure upgrades maybe every 80 to 100 years. We are going to have to do infrastructure upgrades to Baker Street beginning in the next 3 to 5 years. That was a bit of a shock to, I think, everybody when they took the big gulp and said, oh, we're going to be digging up the main drag and replacing infrastructure. When we have those opportunities, we look at all aspects of what's underground, what's above ground. And when we also looked at what was happening above ground on Baker Street, the last time that we had a major upgrade to Baker Street was in the 80s, and that was when we did our heritage renewal. And things are looking a little bit tired, and so we thought it's time, if we have this opportunity where we're digging up streets now, and we look at the treescape, we look at lighting, we look at heritage lighting, we look at planters, we look at all of the things as a whole, then we have a plan to move forward on, instead of doing things piecemeal. And people were a bit shocked when the consultants came back and said, well, the total price tag could amount to this much. But what I want to reassure people about is that this is a long-term plan, and as funding becomes available and as we move forward, those upgrades will take place, and it will be with community consultation as well. These documents, these planning documents, are guidance documents. People come together, they have a vision for what they'd like to see. The broad strokes are put in place, but the detailed design comes when the funding becomes available. The urban design strategy is going to need partnership as well. We're going to need partnership from the business community, from City Council, and from upper levels of government. And when we're looking from the business community, and we're actually started working with them right now, is they're advising us on, we have a parking strategy that's rolling forward. We're going to make some changes to parking, because I think people who've been to Nelson understand we definitely do have parking issues. We have a very busy downtown. But as well, we're looking for leadership from the business community around signage. So our streets are somewhat cluttered. We have people that absolutely love sandwich board signs, and we have people that say, no, we shouldn't have them at all. The design also speaks to patios for restaurants and outdoor seating for patrons of restaurants. And it speaks to our amenity spaces as well, where people can come and sit, have a cup of coffee, and just enjoy watching people go by on Baker Street, sitting on a park bench in downtown. So all of those things are in play at this time. We are probably going to be renovating some of our current amenity spaces to be more more useful. I guess that's the way I would like to put it, while paying attention to what the needs of the business community are, as well as residents, tourists, and everyone else. So it's an exciting time. There's a lot of energy on Baker Street, and I think that this planning document illustrates how busy that street is.
Do you know, Mayor Kozak, is there a timeline attached to the Baker Street improvements, and in particular the infrastructure?
Well, we will be starting infrastructure upgrades within the next 3 to 5 years on Baker Street, because these the water and sewer that is under the street there is near end of life, and rather than wait till it fails, it's important that we get ahead of that and move things forward. So I want to assure people we're not going to dig up the entire street all at once. It will be done at phased projects, but that it will be done in consultation with people, and at that time we'll be able to put in some of those other amenities and improvements as we work.
We're back in studio talking all about the City of Nelson with Mayor Deb Kozak. So we've been talking about some upgrades that have been happening and some that are on the radar to take place. Let's talk about another project that's on the radar and creating a buzz, the Railtown District and its Sustainable Neighborhood Action Plan. Can you tell us a bit about the vision for the Railtown District and its surrounding neighborhood?
Once again, we put in place this planning document, guidance document around that area of our community. And I think what spurred it on even more so was the renovation of the CP Rail building, and the Chamber of Commerce taking occupancy in this beautiful building. And the way that they renovated it was...
It's fantastic.
It is fantastic. Yeah. It has the sustainability principles and while strictly adhering to a heritage construction, it's a wonderful space, and it's being well used by the community. So that, along with some of the business owners within that area, who have done improvements on their property as well in terms of storefronts and creating space there, has triggered as well the need for planning for that area of the city. So the history of Railtown is a gritty history. That's what the consultants talked about it. So one of the vision document speaks to that grittiness, and it maintains the industrial aspect of that area while also speaking to the need for creating some housing, maybe some affordable housing, enhancing the park that's there, Cottonwood Falls Park, which happens to be the site of Nelson's very first power plant back in the day. That's where
I did not know that.
Yeah, that Cottonwood Falls was the site of the very first hydroelectric power in Nelson before it moved to Bonington Falls, and it's still a wonderful focal point for the community and a beautiful little park. But the plan itself talks to sustainability principles around creating housing, maintaining commercial space, and also creating other recreational spaces for our community. Once again, it's an exciting document, and lots of discussion in our community about that. I think that's one of the most fantastic things about Nelson is we're never short on people sharing what they think, and it makes for very detailed discussions and robust documents. So we're happy with the Railtown design. The planning document has been set, and now we're looking for partnerships with developers or interested people who own property in that area to move forward and come up with some plans, and we'll let it fly. I think in terms of a timeline, there's no set timeline on how quickly that development could occur, but the planning document is in place so that when ideas come forward, we can say, do they or do they not match the vision of the community? And that's an important thing to be able to do for community planning.
Speaking of exciting partnerships, Nelson Hydro has a pretty exciting partnership with Bullfrog Power that recently culminated in the grand opening of the community solar garden at Bonington, putting Nelson on the map as a forward-thinking community, with this being the first small community-owned solar garden.
The first community-owned solar garden. Yes.
That's very exciting, don't you think?
It is very exciting. And although hydroelectric power, which Nelson, I think most people know Nelson owns and operates its own power plant, and we distribute our own power, what that utility has given us the opportunity to do is to explore new ways of thinking and new energy. There is a strong desire within our community, and I think across the country, for people wanting to explore different sources of energy as we move into the future. No one is immune from what the issues around climate change are, and I think that there's been some exciting developments in alternative energy sources. So when Nelson Hydro came forward with the idea that maybe we should try a community solar garden, we didn't quite know how many people in the community would be interested in purchasing a panel. We were greatly surprised, and actually we had a really great turnout at the grand opening as well. But people wanted to see this project happen, and although the power output won't be, it's not a lot of power output, what it does for our hydro folks, our hydro staff, is to provide a training ground, a demonstration project, if you will, to see how solar power can enhance what we already provide and how it can feed into the grid. So they're excited as well, and the community's excited, and it also provides a benefit back on your hydroelectricity bill. As they start producing, it'll come back and you'll get a break on your bill, and eventually the cost of the panel will be taken care of. So I think it's a win-win all around. And the folks from Bullfrog Power were very supportive. They gave us a grant of $35,500. They came to the opening event, and they are really excited about this being the first community-owned project.
And I should have mentioned they're a Toronto-based firm, power company, but they fund projects like this across the country.
That's right. Yeah. They are based in Toronto, and when they heard about what we were doing, they wanted to jump on board. So we were more than happy to welcome them, and they were great.
And another way that Nelson is putting themselves on national or international map is with the Smart 21, making the Smart 21 lists. Tell us about the Smart 21 list. What is it?
So again, with our Nelson Hydro utility, when I said it's given us some latitude to try new things, as we were doing some street upgrades in the downtown core a few years ago, we said if we've got the street dug up, what else can we do? And we invested in broadband technology and put in some dark fiber. Over that time, what we hoped, and it is happening now, is we're attracting tech workers who come to our area for the lifestyle, but also because we have we have what they need to do their work right in the city of Nelson. So there is a think tank in New York City called the Intelligent Communities Forum. And what they do, these are profs who have studied what the broadband or technology-based infrastructure has done for communities. And they liken it to the fact that, similar as when the railway was coming through towns in the early, in the 1800s, if you don't get on that train now, you might be left behind. And there's tremendous benefits to having access to broadband technology and in moving communities forward. So these folks got wind of what Nelson is doing. Every year, they choose the top 21 worldwide communities to showcase what they're doing in terms of technology advancement. And we were pleasantly surprised Nelson was chosen as one of the top 21. Now then they moved down to the top 7, and then they announce a winner. But what blew us away is that we are the smallest community worldwide that's ever been nominated.
Wow,
so that was quite
awesome.
an honor. It was really awesome, and it's and having that connection, I think. It's not solely about being nominated or being part of the Smart 21. What's really important and advantageous for our community and others who want to join that movement is that we learn from each other. So now we're plugged into other communities that are on the same path. We're sharing what we're learning about technology, and all of us are advancing together, which is fantastic. That's what it's about.
Welcome back to Upfront. We're joined in studio by Mayor Deb Kozak from the City of Nelson. Now let's move on to a topic that's been a little bit controversial in the past year or so, dealing with cannabis dispensaries, medical cannabis dispensaries. Now, there are currently 5 cannabis dispensaries operating in the city, but they're operating under a new business license that was put together by the City of Nelson, correct?
That's correct. And the business license it's governed by a bylaw. So this has been probably one of the most contentious and difficult issues for council to deal with this term. It's taken a lot of time and a lot of energy. So when the federal government announced that they were going to legalize medical marijuana and eventually recreational marijuana, what we know is that there are a few cities who are dealing with this. There are business entrepreneurs who jumped on board and said, we're going to open these shops and medical marijuana shops, medical cannabis shops. And so what that did was place local governments in the uncomfortable and wrong position of having to, how do we regulate a business that we're not supposed to be regulating? So just so folks understand, local government has absolutely nothing to do with the Liquor Act, for example. We can say where we might like liquor stores, but the Liquor Act absolutely controls how those businesses operate, their hours, how many can be within a certain radius. All of that is governed by senior levels of government. In this instance, because we're in this no man's land right now before legalization takes place and before those regulations come forward, some governments, some local governments are having to deal with these issues. There was a strong support in our community to have medical marijuana establishments available, and council began discussions on this. So what we did was look at the best practices of other communities that have allowed, like similar to Vancouver, and where we really borrowed heavily from was the city of Squamish. And there is a fee of $5,000 a year, and that's to cover what we're putting in time and energy to monitor these places with local government resources, and to recapture some of that expense to do that. But also it outlines hours, like where they can operate, what they must have in place in terms of health and safety standards, what the place can look like. So we had to put in quite a bit of time and energy to doing that. So where we're at with this is that the business licenses are, people have applied for business licenses, and if they are qualified or if they comply, then they'll be granted a business license. But they're also governed by a temporary license to occupy. What that does is, once the federal government legalizes and the provincial government comes into play, the business license will be lifted, because it will no longer be or not the business license. They will still have to get a business license, but it will be like every other business. But the bylaw itself will go back to square one, and so that we can comply, or that the businesses can comply with whatever regulations the provincial and federal government comes out with. So that's a long and twisted tale about how we're dealing with it. And at this time, what I can say is that we have not had any major issues, according to our police. People have been working within the bylaw and working to stay in compliance, and we are waiting for the federal government to make its move and to let us know what's going to happen.
Right. So why a different business license, though? Could these cannabis dispensaries not have operated under an existing business license the city already had in place?
So the existing business licenses that we have would not have covered this operation, and because our bylaw states that we do not give business licenses to illegal operations.
Right.
Technically, The medical marijuana dispensaries are illegal operations, and that's where local governments get caught in the middle of some of these actions by senior levels of government, or there's that time lag. And oftentimes what I find in community is that people in community, laws change, bylaws change, societies change based on how society moves forward, and sometimes those laws don't keep pace when they should. It's been a very time-consuming issue for Nelson City Council, and for a small city, it's taken a lot of resources to deal with this issue. Now, other communities have not allowed dispensaries to open at all. They're just saying, don't you can come to us when it's fully legalized. As I said, in our community there was strong support to have these available, and I would say that there are a lot of people that are coming and using the facilities regionally. They're coming from around the region to access medical cannabis from these dispensaries.
Okay, so switching gears now, let's go to the Recreation Commission Master Plan. We recently on the show spoke with the Castlegar District Recreation Commission about their plans for the next little while. What's on the horizon for Nelson as far as the Recreation Commission Master Plan goes?
We completed our master planning process a few years ago, and we have been taking pieces of it. Like any large plan, you take small chunks of it and you say, this is what we're going to concentrate on. At this time, what we're looking at is the concept of a recreation campus. The way our recreation is structured in the city of Nelson is that we have the new complex that includes the indoor swimming pool and the new arena is run by the Recreation Commission at the regional district level. And that is a partnership between City of Nelson, areas E and F. The old Civic Center that we have and all of the other parks or amenities that might be used regionally are solely the responsibility of the City of Nelson. So when we sat down as a group at the Recreation Commission to talk about what we wanted to see with the Recreation Master Plan, it was identified that the Civic Center still played, it's almost 100 years old,
yes.
And that place is built like a fortress, and it still serves the community well. We talked about the fact that it was, as a regional amenity, how would we begin discussions on how we're going to work together to have a recreation campus concept, and that's where discussions are now. We recreation staff have come forward with some ideas around how we move forward on these discussions, and I think it's an exciting time for us because as we grow as a region, the regional district and the City of Nelson are experiencing modest growth. It's really important that we provide good facilities and amenities for the people who live there and also people who might want to move to our community. The City of Nelson, for a small city of just over 10,000 people, the amount of services that we provide, the activity in our city it's an amazingly strong and vibrant city, and we work really hard to stay on top of issues, to stay on top of planning and provide good services to our people. So we're looking forward to the next year. There's just over a year left in this particular term of office, and we have a lot of work to do before that year is up.
Well, best of luck to you and the rest of City Council.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming in.